Welcome to another Karim's Quest. Now, today I'm having the unfortunate news of delivering what I did not want to deliver about Hurricane Melissa. It has become a Category 4 hurricane and it will hit Jamaica based on predictions. This is something that I did not want to report on. I was hoping that it continued on its original path, which was just to move along the coastal line of the South Coast, right? And then they said that it was going to now impact. It was St. Elizabeth, I believe. I know they said that it's going to impact us at Clarendon, right? So this is something, I was hoping not to deliver. Anyway, let me get into as much information as possible. I'm going to tell you about what the government plans to do. I'm going to tell you about some of the disaster preparedness initiatives that are taking place. I'm also going to be explaining the day-to-day experience of what usually happens in Jamaica when there is a major hurricane. And that one I'm going to be expounding on towards the latter part of the video. So stay tuned. And I always recommending and encouraging my viewers to please subscribe to my channel. Less than 30% of the people who watch my videos actually subscribe. And it's not because they don't want to subscribe, but I guess sometimes you just want the information and you're forgetting to click that subscription or that like button, but it does a lot for me. All right, so let's get into it. Hurricane Melissa is 100, the wind speed is 140 miles per hour, even though it is moving extremely slow. So it's moving probably like 5 kilometers per hour. Now think of that like a car. Think of you going in your car, you're pressing your accelerator, and that car is moving at 5 kilometers per hour. That's a really slow speed, all right? And that is something that we were hoping was not the case, because whenever a hurricane hits a country, you want it to move away from that country as quickly as possible. So if it enters at a certain point, you want it to just run through and spend probably a few hours and leave that country. But at the rate at which it is moving, we really hope that it moves at a faster pace so that we can brace ourselves for it. I mean, aim for the best, but expect the worst type of thing and then just move on. But that's not the case. No, Hurricane Ivan, which occurred in 2004, the wind speed for that was 160 miles per hour. So, and that was a Category 5. So you can compare that wind speed to this one. I also did an extensive article about the top 4 most disastrous hurricanes that we have experienced in Jamaica. All right. So that is what is coming now. The head of the Meteorological Services of Jamaica, Evan Thompson, he stated this incendiary statement, basically saying that it's going to sit there pouring water while it's barely moving. And that is a significant challenge that we have to be aware of. It's going to cause significant widespread catastrophe, life-threatening floods, as long as what is predicted does take place. So that was his, unadulterated take on the entire matter. Not really mincing his words right there. So needless to say, some people are panicking a lot because this is a lot for us. Gilbert is still fresh in everybody's mind, including myself. Like when Gilbert was occurring and I was over Jamaica, it was so calm. If any of you remember that, Gilbert was so calm at some point because I was over Jamaica and I was outside playing, and then you just start to see it get dark. And once it start to get dark, the wind start to get strong and it start to blow and they feel the rain. And I was running through the grill, getting back into the house, not understanding that this was just the eye, it's going to start to pour cats and dog. And that was basically the case, but it was a very scary thing. Now for this one, let me just tell you a little bit about how it developed. So it was first a Category 2, like 2 days ago, or it was just turning into a Category 2. And then overnight, it became a Category 4. So there are some things that we have to take into consideration with Melissa in terms of just, what it is. People are going to be asking, Karim, so when is it going to hit? Based on predictions and trajectories, it's going to hit like Monday night to Tuesday morning. All right. And I'm going to get into that more and more. All right. Now, who is most at risk? That is something that you want to know. I want to give a big shout out to the ODPEM. I want to give a big shout out to JIS because a lot of these people, a lot of these places, I should say, have posted, flash flood areas, and they have posted a bunch of information and made a bunch of information available, as well as doing constant press conferences, just making the public know what is happening. All right. So we're going to look at the southeast part of Jamaica being affected the most. This includes St. Elizabeth, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston, and St. Andrew, and St. Thomas. Now, I feel it for the people, especially in St. Elizabeth, because they are still recovering from burial, which took place in July 2024. So they are just like a little bit a year over burial, and to have to experience this again, and they were without power for a long time. Same thing with places like Christiana, which I was fortunate enough to visit and saw the power lines, basically falling onto the streets, and that was just the reality of where they are. So those areas are going to be affected the most. St. Thomas, it's rough because in Ivan, St. Thomas was inaccessible from Kingston. Right. I remember just seeing trucks just driving and carrying supply and people walking over, and some people have little boats and they're trying to, get access to it. And even now they have told the people in Bull Bay and Grand Spain in, that region that is like kind of between St. Andrew and St. Thomas there. They've told them to evacuate, and I hope they do evacuate. And I remember I don't know if you remember Harborview Drive-In, right? You remember Harborview Drive-In? That was unrecognizable when Ivan was finished. So the coastal line is a very dangerous place to be. And there was this place called, I believe it was like Caribbean Terrace. You can correct me if that's not the correct name. You can write it in the comment section, but Caribbean Terrace, those places got hit terribly. All right. So these are the places that, are threatened the most. They have issued out a display that basically shows all of these places, all right? So you can find those images on their social media pages. They are keeping things up to date. And they are also stating that, people who are close to flood-prone and landslide areas, you have Irish Town, you have Garden Town, you have, for those of you who remember, and the diaspora people, I should say, who remember like Junction in St. Mary, that's a very dangerous place to be now because you don't know when you can have landslide. It's a mountainous area, Bogwalk Gorge is another one of those areas as well. Now, for the St. Mary area now, we use the Junction Road to access St. Mary from Kingston, and a lot of people traverse that spot. Even people who are leaving from St. Mary, they use that spot on, Buff Bay. They use that spot to come and access Kingston. So that's a tricky road to be on. It has always been a tricky road because it's very serpentine. So it's windy just as is, and when you add rain to that, it becomes a very dangerous place to be. The same thing with Bogwalk Gorge. Bogwalk Gorge is, that is torrential. That Real Kobe River, when the rain starts to fall and that river rises, I remember a resident showing me how high that river gets. It's an impossible thing. It's a very dangerous thing. It has taken the lives of many people. So it's not something to play around with. If you're in and around that area, you try your best to avoid it. The alternate route is Sligoville, but in Sligoville, you can have some landslides as well. So keep that in mind, right? Now, as it pertains to those landslides and flooding, they're saying that the mountains and the central parishes, notably Portland, St. Mary that we just spoke about, the Blue Mountains section of Clarendon, are forecast to receive about 15 to 30 inches of rain, and that's more than 2 feet if it reaches to the maximum amount. So, with the grounds already being saturated, and I had said this in my previous video, you can watch that video as well because that one is basically a precursor to this one. I said in that video that, we were having a lot of rains prior to Hurricane Melissa. And so the ground has been saturated. Now, what that means, when the ground being saturated, means that the soil is loose. So even when you're driving past those mountainous areas, rocks can start to fall. Different things can start to fall on vehicles. Keep that in mind, all right? I remember that was happening in Garden Town and in Irish Town and places like Mavis Bank. These are places that, especially, if you want to traverse Blue Mountain, you have to drive through. So keep that in mind. Now, what is the government doing in all of this? I know you want to know that, right? So the government has basically issued, a flash flood warning and an entire just warning for the entire island, I should say, and 881 shelters are all around the island. Now, these are mostly schools, all right? So the schools have been transformed into shelters, and for now, it's like the safest place. I mean, a lot of schools, I guess they're going to be using like the assembly hall where most of the students would gather, and you spend time right there. It's not the easiest of things to do, all right? And they have issued and deployed a bunch of evacuation buses. So buses were sent to even Port Royal. And when I saw the bus that was sent to Port Royal, only one person was on it. I hope more people go on it, because that peninsula can get very dangerous. It's exposed to a lot of water on all sides. Now, during Ivan, the Palisade Road, and that's the road that connects Port Royal to the rest of Kingston. That road was impassable. For those of you who remember Ivan, you couldn't get through on that road. Now, if you come through the Norman Manley International Airport, that's also the road that you use to access to Kingston, right? So that road was impassable, and that was a category 5 as well. But we can't take anything for granted. So they're asking the residents, to be mindful of that, because if the winds do pick up, so far the hurricane is operating in a manner that is succinct with what is being seen, what is being shown on the screen, meaning that it is moving slowly. We don't see a surge in the speed, because some hurricanes just pick up a fast speed and they can tell you one thing 8 o'clock in the morning, and then by 11 o'clock or within that 2-hour time period, it just starts to move quickly. Now, if that is the case, those residents can no longer evacuate. And if you have ever seen Port Royal is still, it still has that old time architecture. The buildings are still like board buildings. It also has one of the best food areas, which is glorious. So, keep that in mind. And it's a fisherman community too. It's a fishing community. A lot of fishermen are there, the people there are very hospitable. So I'm going to ask, it's not the easiest of thing to go and to say you're going to sit down in a like a shelter and, try to act like a normal, you normally would, but it is what it is. There's also buses are being deployed in Old Harbour Bay. Now, Old Harbour Bay is a beautiful community. Again, it's like a fishing community, but Old Harbour Bay always gets hit very badly when it comes on to like hurricanes. So if you're in that community, you take the evacuation measures as seriously as possible, because some of the places that, we occupy are really like, flood prone areas. And so once the torrential weather hits those areas, it's hard to move around. It's hard, it becomes life threatening at that point, and especially for the seniors that are there. The seniors, the disabled, it's hardest on them. Good. Now, you also have a place called Rocky Point in Clarendon. That place is on high alert. They have asked persons to evacuate. The Desmond Mackenzie, who is the Minister of Local Government and Community Development, he's imploring people, to please cooperate. So they have issued these buses. Even the toll has been opened now. So they're not going to be charging anybody to go through the tolls now. When burial was occurring, I was actually reviewing a hotel in Trelawney. And they came to me and they said, boy, I'm sorry, but we have to cut the review, and we're going to ask every Jamaican and everybody who is from Jamaica to go, to back to their homes, as well as they took all the guests from all of the the highest rooms, and they brought all the guests down to like lower level floors, and and the lobby areas, and especially for some of those hotels that have what you call it, like conference rooms, big rooms, they put all of the guests there. So I had to leave. Good. And I was just driving through the tolls. All the tolls were open, and I was just trying to get home as quickly as I could. And it was a good reason why I did it, because, when the hurricane hit, it definitely hit a lot of parishes, especially like, again, St. Elizabeth and Manchester, really, really hard. It didn't hit that Trelawney, but, who can take that chance when you have people in your hotel? So that was the reality about that. And they're also asking persons, to take that as seriously as possible. So the government have been in communication with the toll operators and tell them that, listen, we cannot be charging anybody at this moment. We need people to evacuate wherever they are to get to safer grounds. Also, the airports are temporarily closed, and this happened about 9 o'clock on Saturday. They closed the airport because it was safety concern. So if you were supposed to fly out on the Sunday or on the Monday, you're not going to be able to leave Jamaica. And if you were to fly into Jamaica, you can't enter Jamaica either. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of precautionary measures that have to take place. There is also, well, the Prime Minister also issued a warning that there should be no price gouging. No, price gouging usually happens when goods are scarce. Like when I went to the supermarket, the shelves were empty, no bread. And this was from Friday. I went to the supermarket on Friday, no bread. You can't get biscuits, can't get bread. And I remember one lady asking one of the workers at the supermarket if she could, where she can find egg. There was no egg either. So there's no eggs on the shelves and there's no bread on the shelf as well. So be mindful of that. And because of that, scarcity also causes prices to increase. So the Prime Minister has warned against that. Something that, I hate to have to say these things, but like when hurricanes pass Jamaica, because we produce so many ground provisions, I mean, those things normally get sky high. And I feel it for the farmers in times like these, because a lot of farmers are going to lose their provisions that they have toiled so hard for. Some farmers even lose their livestock. You know what I mean? You have your cattle, you have your goats. Some farmers end up losing those things because of the hurricane. I mean, a lot of farmers tie up the cattle, at the side of the mountain and different places, where they have to put them to feed. But once these things start to happen, it really gets hard for them. So that is where our farmer investment is. And even in St. Elizabeth, which is known as our breadbasket parish, whenever any rain hit them hard, there's a scarcity in so many things. I call watermelon, cantaloupe. St. Mary produces some of the best fruits. So we have to look out for that. No, people are going to want to know what happens on a day-to-day basis when a hurricane is affecting Jamaica. All right, let's say like on a Saturday. Good. What happens on a Saturday? Well, people are expected to prepare, do the last minute things, fill up the car tank with gas. They're expected to clean up any little debris that might be in the yard. They're expected to cut down any limb from trees that are hanging or prune any trees that need to be pruned. So that is the preparatory date. Come the Sunday now, people are expected to, the weather conditions are expected to ramp up. So, the government would make a last push as well to have evacuation buses go to these areas that I mentioned earlier, like Rocky Point, like Port Royal, and urge the people, like literally go to the police and they have a bullhorn and they're talking to the residents, please come out of your house. We're asking you, just close up your house, take out the essentials that you're going to need. A bus is going to be here, it's going to be carrying you to the closest school, and they'll tell them, where these centers are that they're going to be carrying them. Of course, it is not an easy decision to make, right? Most people hate that. Also, on this day, a person might decide that they want to secure the cars. Some people might even wrap the cars with tarpaulin. There were several photos of people putting cardboard over their windshield. So you put cardboard and you tape up your windshield, you tape the front and the back windshield, because you may have projectiles that are flying around. Even if you have like solar panels on your roof, you're expected to take off these solar panels, because once the wind gets very high, it will blow them off. Like in Beryl, we were out of power for a good while. And when I asked a JPS rep, what happened, he said that someone's solar panel actually broke one of the JPS lines. Like it flew off the roof and literally broke the JPS line. And so things like these can be very hazardous. So, if you have the panels, you take off the panels off your roof, and a lot of people are doing that. There was even this one video with this lady who actually took off her zinc roof in anticipation. I mean, of course, she evacuated the house, but you take these careful, cautious measures. So yeah, on that Sunday, you are really trying to tie down. You're expecting the winds and the rain to start to intensify. And now, when it comes on to the Monday, that's the day when we are expecting a lot of rain. So we're expecting the rains, especially with the parishes that are supposed to be impacted. the earliest. You're expecting a lot of torrential rains. You're expected to stay inside at that point. If the rains get very strong, then usually the current just, JPS just takes the initiative and turn off the current. And at that point, again, let me just talk about the previous days. It is suggested that people should have, frozen items in their fridge. Many people also on the day before, right before the hurricane hit, many people are trying to cook off the things that are in their freezers, all right? Because when the hurricane comes, if you're anticipating a loss of current, you should only be having dry food. So the corned beef, the sardine, things like that. So when it come on to those days before, a lot of people start to cook off everything that they have because they're anticipating not having any current. And so if that's the case, then that is what you have to do, and so let me just get back now to the day, right? So I don't even like to deliver all of this because as I'm delivering it to you, I'm remembering all the things that I had to do with Ivan. And Ivan, we were out of current for probably about like a week. And, meat was starting to spoil. And in Jamaica, we don't like to waste food. I can't tell you that. Jamaicans don't waste food. Like, we are always so grateful for food. It's a very expensive commodity in Jamaica. So to have to waste food, yeah, that's not something that we want. So yeah, these are some of the things that we end up having to do. No, the Monday night into the Tuesday morning is when it is predicted to have landfall. That is not something that I like. And I'll tell you why. Gilbert occurred in the day. And so you can see what's happening and you can, if you need to move things, like especially if the room starts to get flooded. So on that Monday night, I'm not going to sleep because I have to be aware. Of course, you have projectiles also flying around. And when things are happening in the night, it's hard, especially if you don't have any power. Because if they cut the power, you literally now have to be navigating your house. And, some of us have leaks in our roof, and that can be very hard to deal with. Like, we have to be catching water in basins and then throwing out. And whenever there's a hurricane, it doesn't even matter if you don't have a leak. What happens is that the wind blows the water all over the place. So even though some people are fortunate enough to not have any leak, but then the water is coming in from all over. So now you might get, you get your furniture might end up getting wet, your settee might getting wet. Some of us use baggers, have baggers that make our furniture, of course, that way swell it up. So there are just so many precautionary things that have to take place. There are people who, have to have so many pans out. It's not the easiest of things, especially in the still of the night. When Ivan occurred, my neighbor at the time was a senior citizen, and I had to be checking in on her, if she's safe, if some of the tape that she put down, some of the things were lifting up. We had to lift up some of her other items that were getting wet and put them on higher ground. And so it is a traumatic experience for a lot of people. Myself included, right? It's definitely a traumatic experience, especially for those people who live closer to the coastal line. And even places like downtown Kingston, they're asking people to please evacuate. So these are realities that, we all will face and going to have to face, all right? And you're going to hear those strong wind and, when you even hear the leaves rustling, it just sounds daunting. It sounds like a horror movie, basically, because you hear the strong winds just blowing and you hear the howling and it just, you might hear like a tree branch crack, literally, and you're wondering, all right, is that close to anything that's to the house? Is that close to a line? And there are some people who they don't prune the trees, like they have these tall trees that they don't prune, and it becomes hazardous for so many of us. So we have to be, very mindful of that. Now, after that Tuesday morning, probably they are predicting that, probably that noon or so, they expect it to be making an exit. And, it's still going to have some heavy rains, and especially on the eastern and the central parishes. But you still have to be waiting for, an official statement. At this point, you don't want to use up all your battery either. You don't want to use up all your charge. So I encourage people to have like Like have like a timed routine with your relatives, especially those who live abroad, and you tell them that, hey, okay, every 12 hours I'll give you an update on who I am, and where I am and how I am, sorry, and how I am. So if that's the case, then you send a message out to them. I still have this old time Walkman that have a speaker on it and has a built-in radio. Now, if it is that the lines go down and the power go, usually the internet may go as well. So you're not getting a lot of information, and we have to go to traditional means of getting information, and that is through the radio. So we keep our dials tuned to the radio, and those persons will be telling us this is what is happening. And that's how it was in Ivan. We had on the radio, they would tell us where to go, what is happening in this place, which road is impassable, what I mean? So you don't have to drive out on the streets, which road is still flooded. Some of the drains might not be cleaned as yet. So we still may have flooding in a lot of areas. We have to go to our traditional means. And please remember that social media applications use a lot of battery. All right. So keep that in mind. I remember people, like even in Ivan, people would go into their cars. Now, them time that we used to have the 3310, which could last very long. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I wonder how far technology has gone, because no phones can only last a day, but then phones would last like 7 days. So most people were kind of okay with battery, but such is life, such is technology. Now by Wednesday, they say that the rain bands will taper off. However, floodwaters may remain in high. All right, so there may be some areas with floodwater. Now we're looking at recovery at about like Thursday, Friday, thereabout. So if it does occur, then Jamaica should be in a recovery state Thursday, Friday. That means that, we're going to start trying to clear up some of the roads. JPS is going to try, I mean, the power and the water is two of the most essential things. And JPS is definitely going to be trying to restore power to a lot of communities then. They actually brought in a lot of workers. They call them pole men. So they're the ones who are going to be climbing the pole and trying to restore the power, put back the lines into place and things like that. So they are actually in the island now, and a lot of them are actually even in St. Thomas. So, these are things that they're anticipating in terms of disaster preparedness and management. And it's not going to be an easy thing. I can't imagine. I mean, these are human beings, and the essential workers are going to have to be out in their numbers. We're talking about the firemen, we're talking about the nurses, we're talking about a lot of policemen, a lot of soldiers are also out. A lot of soldiers were out helping to clean up the gullies and drains. So it's all hands on deck. And these people have their family. And even for a friend of mine who works for a utility company, he's based in a different parish. So he was so concerned about leaving his wife and daughter because he has to go to a different parish now. When you leave your loved ones and, a part of the roof might start to leak, or water may start to come in under the door, and, the house start to get flooded, and you as the male figure can't be there to give assistance, that can be very worrying. So there's a psychological component to it that bothers a lot of people. Even though there are a lot of people who are very depressed right now, rightfully so. I know a senior citizen. I know two senior citizens who are extremely worried. If you watch Karim's question, you see like a lot of the things that I post about Jamaican language, and I post that with Vivian Grandbarrett. Excellent videos. Watch them if you want to learn the meaning, the hidden meaning behind some of our patois languages, as well as I have Cecile Clayton, who she gives me a lot of history on the JOS buses. She gave me a lot of history on old time, growing up in old time Jamaica, like, as children, what type of games they used to play. She talk about the war theater. These are two senior citizens, and they are very worried, you know what I mean? So for a lot of our senior citizens, they are very worried. I have to be checking up on them, conveying information to them as well, because at the end of the day, safety is of utmost importance in times like these, all right? And we don't want to take it for granted. I believe that we took Gilbert for granted, and that's why Gilbert is so fresh in the minds of so many, because Gilbert was a category 3 when it hit Jamaica, right? It was not a category 5, but it was, we grossly underestimated Gilbert. You know what I mean? We were out playing, we were out watching it, people were laughing, especially when I was over it. Even me as a child then, I can't believe how calm the eye is. You know what I mean? Like the eye was so calm, right? I remember just when it was passing by, when it started to pass by, and then you started to see the clouds, and you see the lightning, and you hear the thunder, and then the rain just started to come in with one big gush. I had to run through the grill, literally, right? Because it just moved from day to night immediately, and the torrential weather started. You would see projectiles flying, you would see tree branches literally just flying all over the place. Some people, it literally lift up even some people's animals. So you can tell it lift off satellite dish off roofs. You know what I mean? There were so many communities where you would see like a satellite dish just in the middle of the road. So there are certain realities that we have to face, and people remember very keenly, with Gilbert. And I remember those things also very keenly with Ivan, because when Ivan occurred, I mean, it was the first in a long time we had experienced this type of torrential weather, and it was in the night. So it was very horrifying just to hear the trees, and I mean, just to hear so many different sounds, and you would hear like a neighbor, a glass break, and I mean, it was horrid to say the least. All right. So let's talk about some critical things that I want people to keep in mind. All right. Some pointers that they're telling people is that you pick a part of your interior that is very safe, that has no window, especially for those of us who have those glass windows. You want to stay away from glass windows. They also recommend that you use tape to tape like the back of the glass window, because most of these glasses are not tempered glass, meaning that when they break in big pieces, and they can become very hazardous. Again, can you imagine when these things are happening late at night? I mean, we have to be very cautious with that. So you go into a room that has no window. All right. You try to be safe. You put everything as high as you can, especially if you know that the house that you're living in can become easily flood prone. So you put everything as high as you can. Now, if you have your personal documents, that can be a passport, your birth certificate, your house title, your car title, you put these things in a Ziploc bag, you put them in a high drawer. All right. So, if I put them in 2 Ziploc bags so that they don't get wet. So keep those things in mind, be as cautious as you can. You must always have a radio, a battery powered radio. And I always encourage people, to stay away from open flame. So this thing with candle and kerosene oil lamp, I don't encourage these things. There are so many LED lanterns, and they're all affordable now. Even the little zapper that they use for the mosquitoes, those things even have lights on them. And LED does not burn a lot of current. So you can have these things and it can last for a very long time, because I always dread having these open flames, because sometimes you end up falling asleep, or sometimes the wind is so strong it can blow it over. You know what I mean? And it can become a hazard. You can have children and they're walking around, and these things become a hazard. All right. So they have these dimmable LED lights now, and the lanterns that are dimmable. You can always use those things. So I encourage people to get them. And even if you don't get it for this one, get it and have that safety kit just in case. They're also asking persons to have your emergency kit very close by. All right. Something you can walk and something cut you, I mean? It's dark. It's presumably going to happen when the time is dark. So, I mean? Anything can happen. All right. You keep those things in mind. Again, have your phone on airplane mode just to save battery. Tell your relatives that you talk to them within a certain interval. You have check-in times that you have with them. You try to park your vehicles away from trees. Good. So these are some of the precautionary measures that you want to take. I've seen a lot of people, like I've seen some people who even remove their roof. There's this one video that I saw on social media with this lady who removed her roof. Of course, she's not staying in the house, but she just said, listen, she know that the roof is going to fly off. She can't bother with that. She just take off the sheet of zinc and she put them up somewhere. So many people are taking, these precautionary measures because we can't run any risk. Now, if you're watching this video up to this point, I'm encouraging you to subscribe. All right, less than 30% of the people who watch my videos actually subscribe. And it's not because they don't want to. I guess sometimes you're just watching the video, enjoying it, you're forgetting that, let me subscribe and, see some more of this person's video. So click that subscription button for me, please, as well as the like button. This is a Jamaican channel. This is operated by a Jamaican, who is myself, right? And I go around and I tell beautiful stories of Jamaica in terms of, what is happening in our country and our side of the story as well. So I recently did a piece on this Rasta man who have this, acres of land. And he refused to sell it because he just said, no, my family worked hard for this piece of land. And he ended up turning that land into a tourism attraction. And he provides employment for more than 100 people in his community. So these are some of the beautiful stories that are out there that I want you to be able to watch and to enjoy about Jamaica. And every now and again, I do these special features where I come and I talk about items because sometimes even when I'm watching news, sometimes the terminologies that they use and the jargons that they use are so complicated. I have to do research. So, every now and again, like I research these things and I break it down to you in a simple way that you can understand and you can appreciate. All right. So this was another lovely special episode. Continue to stay tuned to Karim's Quest. Continue to be safe if you're living in Jamaica. And if you're a diaspora member, continue to send your prayers to us. As usual, you're always welcome to join the quest.